Human beings seem to suffer from one core issue. The things that we want to do, we don't do, and the things that we don't want to do, we keep doing. Thanks for joining me for another segment of On the Couch with the Harvest Clinic. This month we're going to be talking about one of the biggest problems I think we have as human beings, a predicament that we're in, which is this. Very simply put, it's that knowing doesn't lead to change. Have you ever experienced this, where you know in your mind and you're set in your heart on something that you want to do differently? A behavior that you want to change, something that you want to pursue, and yet time after time you find yourself not doing that thing? Do you ever find that the very thing that you're trying not to do, time and time again, you end up going back to that same habit of behavior? This is a fundamental issue that you could say underlies almost every psychological condition, so to speak. This month we're going to be opening up this predicament, because I feel like if we can understand this predicament and if we can understand what maintains it, then we can do something about it. So this isn't specific to any one individual, but rather it's an invitation this month to start to look at your life and to look at what things do you find yourself doing that you don't want to be doing anymore, yet they still keep happening. So today we're going to focus on 3 common types of unworkable behaviors. Unworkable behaviors are all of these things, the things that we keep doing that we don't want to do, and they're not working to give us a fulfilling life, but we keep doing them. So the 3 we're going to focus on today are people pleasing, worrying, and addictions. So let's start with people pleasing. Some of you might resonate with this, some of you may not, but people pleasing by a simple definition is a pattern of behavior where you put aside your own needs, your own desires, and your own thoughts, and instead find yourself catering and yielding to the status quo, the people around, others, it could be family, friends, anyone there. It can come in various forms. One of the common forms of people pleasing is a difficulty to express what you want in a situation, what you need. It could come in the form of having difficulties to say no to something. So when someone suggests something or asks something of you, you find yourself almost saying yes before you've even thought of the toll or the cost this will have on you. People pleasing can also come in the form of how we present ourselves. For example, if you're feeling sad or frustrated, that when you're around certain people, you still put on the smiling face, the customer service face, and you tell jokes and you're funny, and all of this to maintain a positive feel. Sometimes I've kind of used the analogy in people pleasing is kind of like being an air conditioner, on auto. I've got a remote here. It's kind of like when I set this thing to auto, it's not on cool, it's not on heat. It's just going to sense the temperature and adjust it. When we are kind of really habitual people pleasers, we become very aware of the state of the room, the temperature, and are constantly trying to adjust things to keep it comfortable for everyone else. And so people pleasing has a number of costs. If you can relate to anything that I've said, you're probably aware of the costs of people pleasing. One of the big ones is feeling burned out. Feeling overwhelmed and having too much on your plate, possibly from always saying yes. But another big cost is actually feeling isolated. Even though you do a lot to please others, there's a sense of isolation because you're not feeling really seen. You're only feeling seen on the basis that you continue with that behavior that is being acceptable or liked. So there's a feeling of loneliness and isolation. Another big cost, I think, is being taken advantage of and the feelings associated with that. Let's move on to the second one, which is worrying. Some of you might identify with this behavior. And worrying, I want to clarify, is a behavior. Certainly we can experience fear, anxiety, and feeling worried. But worry itself, as I'm describing it here, is the behavior of problem-solving potential events that may take place in the future, in the present. There's a great saying by Mark Twain, some of you might have heard it. It says, "I've experienced a great many terrible things in my life, some of which have actually happened." The thing about worrying is that there's a deception in worrying, which is kind of like, as long as I hold this information in my conscious awareness, then the thing won't happen. It's almost like a sense that there's almost a fear sometimes of not worrying, because it's kind of like, well, if I'm not thinking about it, then I'm not going to be aware of it, then it might actually happen. The third type of common unworkable behavior I wanted to talk about today is addictions. Addictions can take many forms. Sometimes you might think of them classically in terms of, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, but you could also have addictions, you can imagine, to things like other stimulating events, such as, it could be pornography, or it could be things like Netflix and movies, TV series. But it might also be just other common things like food, chocolate, fast food, chips, bread, carbohydrate, processed foods. They stimulate the body's biochemistry to feel good in some way. And so we can find ourselves turning to these things anytime we start to feel a little bit flat. Talking about addictions, there are many costs that you might already be aware of. To name a few, there's the cost to finances, the cost to health, the cost of time. It can cost relationships sometimes. When we struggle with addiction, there can be feelings of inadequacy, guilt and shame and self-blame. Our self-worth can be affected. So there is quite a cost to addictions as well. As I said earlier, one of the things at the Harvest Clinic we really value doing is looking beneath diagnostic labels. There are 200 and something diagnoses today. But one of the themes that you see underlying almost every one is that there is a disconnection between what is desired and what is done. So just as an invitation that I want to extend to you now, the first step in dealing with these behaviors is awareness and clarity. Just like if you were out at sea on a boat and you found yourself drifting aimlessly or finding yourself going the wrong way, not where you want to be heading, the first thing you'll need to do is to work out what you're doing, where you want to be going, and where you are. And so in today's workshop, I just have 3 simple questions I invite you to consider. And these questions are based on building our awareness and clarity over the current state of things. The first question is, one of the behaviors I find myself doing is, or a better way, one of the unworkable behaviors I find myself doing is. Now I just want you to pick one thing. There are many things even in my life I can acknowledge are things that I don't want to be doing that I keep doing. I'm no exception to the rule here, but I find that this works best when we just focus on one important thing. The second question is, the costs of doing this in my life the costs of doing this in my life are. And here I want you to just notice some of the costs that this behavior has, the toll it takes. Consider this in terms of literally, relationally, personally, both health-wise, psychological health-wise, and in terms of just your future and what you care about, the costs. The last question I invite you to consider is, I would like to move towards being more, or I would like to move towards, and you can just finish that sentence. So for example, we were talking about people pleasing earlier. As an example, you might say, I would like to move towards being more assertive, or I would like to move towards being more authentic. If we were doing something like worrying, you might say, I would like to move towards being more present and engaged. So here, simply today, we are noticing the current state and what's happening. Over the next 4 weeks, we're actually going to be looking at the 4 things that keep us stuck in these cycles of behavior, that keep us doing the thing that we don't want to be doing. Thanks for joining me on the couch. I'll see you next week.